Hi, I'm Joshua Finn from J&H Aerospace. Welcome to the build video for the J&H Aerospace Echo P-30. This is a beginner-friendly P-30 kit designed by Georgia native Ken Grubbs. He was a dentist here in Georgia, and he used this airplane to get young people involved in model airplanes. Bill Brown, who is still active as of this recording in flying, helped design the kit, particularly with the drafting and laser cutting. And then he handed the kit off to us about a year ago to proceed with kitting it on a larger scale. So now we're going to show you how to build it from the kit that we have produced. There are a few modifications we have just implemented to make the airplane legal for the AMA Moffett class, in addition to P-30 and usable as a towline glider and so on. So we're going to show you how to build this airplane. Alright, we have the set of plans laid out here to begin building the airplane. And so we're going to start on the fuselage. I always like to start on the fuselage. Some people like to start elsewhere, but that's where I'm going to go. I'm not going to go into extreme detail. My main goal is to just show you how to lay everything out. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is locate a set of fuselage sides. So in your kit, you'll have two of these fuselage pieces, and so we're going to build off of these. Now, before we lay these out, I recommend doing something to protect your set of plans so that as you build this airplane, you don't stick the airplane down to the plans. And part of that is also making sure there's no junk under the plans. So we're going to put down a piece of parchment paper. This one is used, and that's okay. The main thing is we want a non-stick surface. Now we're going to take one of these fuselage sides and we're going to break it out of the set of plan, the carrier sheet here. You can use a razor blade, which is probably the best practice, but you can typically pop these out fairly easily by hand as well. So lay that down over everything and then get some straight pins and pin it down. So you want to check that everything is lined up. And there we go. Really all we're after is framing up this area of the fuselage. Now, you're going to have these uprights, and there are possibly, if you're dealing with one of our older kits, you'll have this set of uprights. This is the new one. These are Moffett legal. They're a little bit wider. And we're updating the plans to reflect this. In the intervening time, we've got kind of both. So this gives you a little skinnier fuselage. So if you're outside the US, use this because a little skinnier. Inside the US, this might be useful because Moffett's a fun class. You do have to ballast the airplane up to comply with that. But none of that really matters yet because the uprights and whatnot are all the same. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pop out one of each part out of here. So this long piece is going to go up here, is forming the roof of our cabin on one side. And then we're going to have a couple of diagonal bits here. Just like this. Sorry, wrong one. And this one I've got a diagonal on. Trim that off. And so everything's going to fit together like that. Now you're going to have these tall upright pieces that are going to go along here. We'll talk about those later. In the meantime, we're going to glue these down. Now these thinner strips, it's better to crisscross the pins over them. And there you go. So we're going to do this on a second fuselage side and then we'll come back. Alright, at this point we have two fuselage sides set here kind of as mirror images of them, and we're going to work from here. So we're going to start out by putting in these upright pieces, and these are fuselage stiffeners. So you can see the dotted line shown right here, which shows where to install them. And so we're going to come down from straight on top at the back of the cabin, line it up all the way down to the back of the slot at the bottom. Don't cover that slot up, whatever you do. Next, go back to one of your fuselage side sheets and break out this little piece. So we have two of them. So we're going to install these per the plan. So they go like that with the little bevel facing forward. This forms a slot that your landing gear is going to mount into. So we're going to place that directly over this little slot, line it up with the bottom, and there you go. If you're not using CA, it would be wise to pin all of these parts down so that they stay put. Next, we're going to look at our rubber anchors. So the Echo is equipped with two different rubber anchors. So you've got a forward one and an aft one, and there is some usefulness to that. These little circular pieces are the anchor reinforcements, and so those are going to prevent your rear peg from ripping through the lightweight balsa fuselage sides and generally making a mess of things. So these, what I recommend, since the grain of the fuselage is going fore and aft, position these with the grain going up and down. Now notice we're doing this with these fuselage sides mirrored to each other so that we don't create two left fuselages or two right ones. And there we go. Okay, at this point we're going to start attaching our fuselage sides together. So what I recommend doing is going onto this sheet and looking at the pieces that are labeled for the bottom, which is letter B. And this is the sheet that's labeled M for Moffett Legal. And what we're going to do is we're going to snap out a few of these. Now you'll notice how I'm doing this. I'm not paying attention to the specific order of these. These up here at the top go to the tail, and this area goes to the nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break out 3 of these, and these are going to go on the bottom. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fuselage side here. I'm going to stand it up like this, and we're going to pin it down. Now there are a variety of ways of doing this. This is simply the method that I learned, and so it's what I'm going to show you. You could put like triangles up here or something, you know, carpenter square or what have you, to get that started. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our glue, and we're going to use it to glue in a few of these pieces. So this one right here is resting flat against the bottom, so we can put it in. And since I'm using CA, I can dip a little bit of accelerator down here, and instead of pinning this flat because it's trying to pop up a little bit, I can just dunk some CA accelerator on there, and now that's going to stay put. And what we'll do is we will come back here a little further, and we're going to repeat that. Let's say right here. Now this piece is kind of sticking up a little bit. We want to make sure it's flush on the other side here. Now I'm able to kind of eyeball this one and make sure that it's square, but you may want to do something like stick another piece under it or something of that nature, just to ensure that it all lines up well. We're also, at this point, I think it's useful to come along and put one up right here. And same procedure, you would do well to block this up. That would be something too thick, but you know, find a scrap piece of wood or some of the strip wood in your kit, like so, to hold that up. And like I said, this one's hardened up, so it's there to stay at this point. Now let's bring our second fuselage side into play. So it's simply going to rest on those little pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue on each one of them. Just like that. Make sure we're lined up correctly, because we could stagger things and then you'd have a mess on your hands. Now, mine is, because I've got some CA accelerator down there, this piece right here bonded almost instantly, so we are where we're going to be. That being said, weighing down the back of this with some heavy object, or even not so heavy, or pinning it down might be a very good option at this point. But there you can see, we're mostly straight. I've got a little bit of crookedness going on, but not too bad. Go to this area right here on your parts sheet, and we're going to break out these short little pieces that are in the middle. There are 3 of them. They are denoted over here on your plans as the ones that go in between. So you're going to put one right here at the back of these cabin rails, You're going to put one right here over the center of the wing mount area. You're going to put one at the front of the cabin. So let's break those three out. So I'm going to put one right up here. And there we go. At this point, the fuselage becomes significantly more stable because we now have a kind of a hard point area. I would recommend coming back here and put in these top two pieces. The ones on the bottom are going to be a little bit difficult to get to, so it may be better to just wait on those. And so what we're going to do is drop these in. Try to get them flush with the outside. And we're still using these top pieces, so I'm going to put the one at the front, and oops, I've already dropped those out. That wasn't wise. And now what I'm going to do is all of these that are the full length, I'm going to go ahead and drop those in. So there's three more that go back here. I'm going to leave the tapered ones from the front and back alone. All right, at this time we have all of these constant cross-section pieces in here. So we now have the two shorter pieces that go up here in the nose and the three somewhat shorter ones that are going to go back here in the tail. We're going to wait on those because we want to pinch the nose together a little bit and come back here, and I don't know if, let me see if I can rotate you guys around a little bit. There we go. We're going to pinch the tail back together as well. So let's break off one of these little pieces right here. These are the nose sheeting. So they are tapered to the sides, so the shorter side of this goes at the front. And you may want to have something to hold this side to side or whatever. Mine actually needs my finger while I come in here and accelerate the process along. Now, for the aft section back here, we're going to need to do something slightly different. There is this pair of these pieces with a little hole in them, like so. And then there are two more on the other sheet. So we are going to glue all these together in a stack, and then we'll come back. All right, we have this glued into a block, but if you look here, this is a constant thickness here, and our fuselage tapers together. So we want to sand this to a taper. Now it doesn't have to be exact, just get a little bit. And now you can see it has a little bit of a tapered cross section, so it will fit in here correctly. Alright, so we're going to take this rear portion, the aft closure of the fuselage, we'll put glue on each side, and I already have this pinned, so it should go in fairly well. May have to sand a little bit off of the top before all is said and done, but there you go. Now at this point we can go ahead and drop in all of the tapered bits fore and aft, and then we'll pull this fuselage off and we'll drop all the ones in the bottom as well. So we have all of the parts in up top, so now what we're going to do is just repeat the same procedure on the bottom. So the first thing you want to do is break out this other nose section piece. And make sure that it matches the taper and everything. Alright, we're going to drop all the rest of these in off camera. Again, pay attention to the orientation of all these parts. So you've got these untapered sections that go in between here. And I will show one important point before we go. You're going to take two of these to form this landing gear slot closure. So we'll glue these in. Like so. And like so. So now we have this convenient slot for our landing gear to go in. At this time, your fuselage is done structurally. There are a few things that will be added on in the future, but this is basically where you want it to be prior to covering, other than sanding it. I recommend resisting the urge to sand it right now because I recommend building out the nose block, and then once you've built out the nose block, you can sand that all as a unit and have everything matched and mated correctly. So we'll do that next. Okay, the next thing we're going to build on the Echo is the nose block. So you'll notice that there are several different segments here, and that is because if you look at this cross-section view of the nose block over here, you'll see that the back of it is made up of 4 very thin pieces, and then you've got 3 somewhat thicker pieces, and then 1 really thick piece on the front. So thin, 1/16 sheet, medium, 1/8 sheet, and then you've got 1/4 inch sheet on the front. Now, on all of these except for this one right here, the hole is drilled straight through the middle, so pay close attention to that. So for these 4 pieces, we are simply going to glue them all together. And you want to be very careful as you're doing this to make sure that they all match up with that center hole and so on. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm cross-graining these pieces as I go, because they are of a square cross-section, so you can do that. And there you go. And I would now give this just a very light sanding to take the burrs off of it. So next we're going to pop out these medium thickness pieces. So we're going to start with the biggest one, and we're going to take the second one, and these are not designed to cross grain. They have to be aligned together. Like so. And then we're going to glue this next one on, and you're going to notice you have to use the center hole to line it up, because it's going to go on slightly differently. And it is cross-grained to the others. Like this. So now we're going to take this last segment of our nose block and pop it out. And you're going to want to line its grain up with the grain of this last component of the nose block. And I've got it off-centered just a little bit because I'm not paying attention. But you'll see that this slot, kind of this area right here, lines up pretty well. And this is the top, bottom, and like so. Now take this nose block and turn it so that you're looking at the back, and notice these holes are different sizes. This hole up front is sized to fit your big nose bearing, and the rest is just size big enough to fit your prop shaft. So come around here and smear this glue in, and what you want to do is line this up so that there's the same gap all the way around on this nose block. Just like that. At this point you can stick the nose block in and do some sanding. So what we're going to do is slide it in so that this gap right here sits on the bottom. Just like that. We're going to go ahead and take some sandpaper to it. I'm going to speed the process along a little bit and cut along the grain here. Do a little bit on the bottom side here as well, so that now I can sand this in, and I'm holding it against the fuselage carefully. That was not careful. Now don't sand this all the way around. I unfortunately have. However, I'm going to cut this front of the nose back just a little bit, so that should be okay. And so now, in our side view at least, we've got a pretty clean profile. I need to clean up just a little bit more right here. is we want to blend this smoothly into the nose. And we still have our little groove right here. At this point, let's go ahead and sand everything on the sides. And there you go. There is the nose profiled out. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to sand this back a little bit. And now we have a nice mounting surface for the nose bearing. Don't glue this in at this time. Wait until after you cover this with tissue. Okay, at this time, we're going to bring in a piece of 1/32 piano wire, and we're going to make the landing gear. So what you want to do is just start over here on the side and kind of measure off of that to get the correct angle. And there are a variety of ways to do this, but the bottom line is try to approximate that angle. And then you can work your way up like so. So what I'm doing is pinching it at the beginnings of each of those bends so that I can get this in an accurate fashion. And it's very important when you're bending a piece of wire that you get it firmly in here. And I mean, I'm white knuckled on this piece of wire, so then I push with my thumb along here as close to where I'm gripping it as possible so that I get that result, which is a very nice crisp bend. A lot of people, I'll show on another piece of wire, a lot of people like to get a piece of wire in their hands and they do something like this, and when you do that you end up with this really sloppy bend right here. And so that's not going to work. You want sharp, crisp bends where it's only bent at that corner. And this one's not bent as far as it needs to be. So we're going to come in here and adjust it a little more. That should be about right. Just like that. And so we're just going to keep working around. And I need to check this one against, it's wise to check this against the fuselage itself. So then I can slide in here. So I want this to fit fairly tightly into my fuselage. And then if you notice, I'm kind of off-centered here. Let's see if I can, yeah, like that. That's not good, so we want to fix that. And so now you can see this lines up real nicely. And there we go. And we can verify now that this landing gear fits very, very snugly. May have to bend it together a little bit, get it to fit very snugly inside our fuselage just like that. Alright, so take your wheels that are over here. We're going to pop 2 of these out, and we're going to glue them cross grain just like so. Now, take a sanding block and smooth off any rough edges. Now, we have a piece of our aluminum tubing right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to rest the razor blade on the end of this. So we've got just a little bit sticking out, about the thickness of the wheel. And we're going to roll this under a razor blade back and forth very carefully. And so what that does is it leaves a little score mark right here. And so we then can take a pair of needle nose pliers. We can just bend this very gently. If it takes any resistance at all, you want to go roll it some more under that razor blade so that you don't bend this piece of aluminum tubing. And now what we're going to do is we'll slide it on the end of a piece of scrap wire, like so. And we're going to put just a tiny little dab of CA on this. And that allows us slide it in here. Try to get the wheel on straight, as straight as you can. And I do highly recommend, even if you don't like CA glue, use CA glue for this step. And now you've got your wheel in there, secured pretty well. And we're going to take our landing gear, and we'll slide it through. Now there is enough sticking out that you can either bend this over, or you can cut off one more little piece of aluminum tubing. You can stick it on the end. And then put a little dab of glue on the outside, not on the inside. Just like that. And you want to leave enough gap for your wheel to rock back and forth a little bit. It's better to have your wheels a little sloppy than too tight, because you want them to roll freely. Just like that. So that is the result that you end up with. And so you can see it can slide back and forth a little bit there. Okay, so we now have the fuselage sanded. Landing gear is in place, not glued because we want it to be removable. Nose block is not glued because it needs to be removable, but we've sanded everything nice and smooth, so the fuselage construction is now done. Find your rudder parts, which are on this sheet right here. And all of these are pre-cut to size, so all you have to do is break them out and start working with them. Now you can sand these as desired, so for example this base for your rudder, you might want to remove a few of the burrs off of it. Okay, so we have the vertical tail and the subfin finished, and we have sanded them to nice round edges, as you can see here. We'll set those aside for the time being. Next, let's get some of our fuselage parts sheets out here, because they have the wing ribs on them, which are these ribs right here and here, and there's more on the other one. Additionally, you'll want to get one of your 1/16 inch strips, and you will want to get this sheet for this component right here down the middle, which is your stab spar. And I said that wrong, it's not your stab spar, it's your stab trailing edge. So it's going to go here, and you can really just take straight pins and pin it down. So this is the 1/8 square wing leading edge and stab leading edge. They're both made from the same material. And then at this point, let's go ahead and break out a few stab ribs. And we'll start laying those in place next. Okay, so next we're going to take one of these ribs on each end. We're going to glue them in. And then we will secure the spar against them with a straight pin. Okay, since we have all of the stab ribs in place, now let's go ahead and fit the wingtips in. The wingtips are usually cut a little bit long here, so you'll have to trim off the edge like so. Sometimes get them to fit. Now take some of your 1/16 square strip wood, and we're going to glue it in place. And now once that's dry, you can lift the stab off and put the lower spar in as well. Okay. So we've cut a lower spar to size, and we're just going to go ahead and drop it in. And there we go. Now, before you can cover this, you're going to want to sand it. And you can either sand this leading edge, or you can use a tool like this, which is called a razor plane or a block plane. And you can just slide it down the leading edge with a little bit of care. And start trimming that off. Now what you want to do when you're doing this is you want to make sure that you're holding on to this leading edge rather than back here, because if I hold on back here, watch what happens. If I can get it to catch in here. You see how it starts to skew the wing like this? And when that happens, that will break off all of your wing ribs. Now, as you get more comfortable with it, you may choose to use a motion kind of like this, or lay it on the edge of your work surface so you can get a better angle. The bottom line is you're going to keep doing that until you've got a nice rounded surface, because you want these ribs to blend in with the rest of the wing. You can do the same thing back here with the trailing edge. It's not as important because this is a fairly thin trailing edge, but it might be useful to come in on the trailing edge, make a couple of passes, just like that. And now you can see my trailing edge has thinned down considerably, and it tapers in nicely with the ribs. Once you're satisfied with how much you've planed this, and you may want to round off the underside of the wing as well, like so. Come back and use some sandpaper to smooth off any burrs, such as these laser tabs from where it was removed from the part sheet, so that you can get a very smooth covering job when you lay your tissue paper over this. Okay, now that we have completed the other parts of the airplane, we're down to the wing. So the wing has most of its parts pre-cut except for the leading edge and this turbulator spar that is the last thing you're going to add to the wing. So locate on this parts sheet here these strips and these and these. Basically everything except this little stab platform that gets dealt with much later. So we're going to break out this pair of notched pieces, this very nice long one. One of these is going to be used as your wing trailing edge, and the other is your wing spar. So what you will want to do first of all is to pin down the trailing edge. And then the next thing that I recommend is go ahead and pin down this wing spar. Now don't pin it extensively because you may have to reposition it slightly to get it to match up well with the ribs. So basically if you just pin it at each end like that, you should be good to go. Next, locate these two parts. So these are your wing tip spars. There is a pattern over here for those. But those are going to go out here at the tips. Now there's a beveled section on these, and it's very important that the beveled section go in towards the wing. It's not for a taper out there at the wingtip. Same thing with this one. And so again, we will just gently position these in place so that we can move them around as needed. Then there are these two remaining notched pieces, and these are the trailing edges for your wingtips. They will go at these locations. I recommend going ahead and putting a small dab of glue on those, bearing in mind that you're going to reposition them slightly. Well, not just slightly. You're going to crack that joint back up because you're going to set dihedral in this wing after you have mostly assembled it. Now on your wing rib sheets that came from your fuselage sides, you're going to notice there is a set of ribs right here that are of tapered length. These are for use at your wingtips. However, if you'll notice, this rib, which is the same length as these, is longer than this one right here. So that means that this rib corresponds to the second bay in your wingtip, so the center panel all uses the same type of ribs. And so what you're going to do is put glue at the spar notch and on the trailing edge, and slot this rib into place. And you simply want the ribs to be straight up and down. And I just violated what I was trying to do, which is put the glue on the spar slots, not the leading edge. And then we'll put one in the center section. And there we go. Now that you have completed all of the ribs in the center section, move on to the wingtips. So I recommend starting with the actual tip ribs and work your way in. So they slot in into the tip, and then you can bring them down on the spar. Make sure everything is lined up here so that you get it exactly squared off. And you may want to find a straight pin and that just holds things nice and steady so that you can then populate the rest of that rib. Or not the rest of that panel, I should say. So we have all of the ribs populated on the wing. So what we are going to want to do now is to cut to size and install the wing leading edge. And we're going to start with the center panel of it. So it's very important that you look at where this dihedral break is occurring on each side, and that's where you're going to lock this in. So while you're holding it positioned there, come down here and cut it to length. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to put glue on each rib all the way down. Now you can pin this in place. In my case, this has kind of locked in already, so it's good to go. Next comes your wingtip. So what you're going to do is we're just going to install this with the leading edge along, and then we will trim it to size. So now the leading edge at the tip is trimmed to size. We can take one of our wingtip pieces and we'll see that it's a little oversized. So what we'll do is trim off the back of it. You have to remove that pin. And there we go. Take a scrap piece of wood off of one of your parts sheets. At this point, we're going to break this off, and we're going to cut this piece so that it is 2 1/4 inches long. Next, what we're going to do is remove all of the straight pins out here on this wingtip, and we're going to pin the leading edge down right there, and we'll also make sure the spar is locked down. And now we can pop this wingtip loose. And you want to carefully make sure that any bending occurs back here at these joints and not elsewhere, because we're going to jack this up 2 1/4 inches using that little stick. Now we're going to pop it back out to give us space to squirt glue in. And I've got a rib that's not bonded there. And now we can prop this back up. If for any reason this pops loose and starts wandering, you can use more pins to lock everything down. You could put a container of some sort out here, you know, a large object like a soup can or something to hold that in place or what have you. And now we're just going to leave that until the glue has hardened. We now have the wing plan form largely completed, so find some 1/16 strips, 1/16 square strips, not 1/16 by 1/8 or anything like that. You'll need a fairly long one to go across the center span. And we'll want to go ahead and cut that to size. So now we're just going to squirt glue in each of these little slots and lay it in the same way that we did on the horizontal stab. Once we have this center leading edge spar installed, then you can install one out at the tips in the same manner, and you can go a little bit long for now and then trim to size later. And if your little dihedral gauge falls out, it's okay for the moment. I would put it back in. And then you just want to repeat the same thing over on the other side, and then afterwards we'll come back and we'll trim that. At this time, your wing is finished. We have trimmed the turbulator spars to size. We've sanded all the surfaces and so on. At this time, the structure of your Echo is now complete, so we need to talk about covering. So there are a couple of ways to cover this model. One is to use Elmer's glue stick or something of that nature. And so you can take this off, smear it around the flying surface entirely, and then what you would do is take a piece of tissue that you would trim roughly to size, and you would lay the sticky side down. Cut it slightly large all the way around, except at, say, the base where this is going to glue to your horizontal stab or something of that nature. And then you can come around with a glue stick and get all that excess, get a little bit of glue on it, and lap it over. Then you would cut this, you already have it cut off. Then you would add glue stick to this side, flip it over, and repeat that same process. And you would do that for the entire aircraft. So for the fuselage, you would run glue stick along the entirety of the side of the fuselage and lay down the tissue, obviously a longer piece than this, over that, cut it out a little bit long so that just a slight bit, maybe a 1/16 inch oversize. You can use scissors or a razor blade for that, and then you can lap it down so that you get a complete seal of your tissue all the way around. Another thing you could do to trim the tissue is to take an emery board and you can rub it across, and the sandpaper texture of it will cut the tissue without damaging the underlying structure. Now, for a water-resistant finish, notice I said resistant, not waterproof, something like nitrate dope is the preferred item. So this is tautening nitrate, and that's very useful for like your fuselage or what have you. However, I would actually consider non-tautening nitrate for the flying surfaces. This is available from Aircraft Spruce. SIG Manufacturing also has some various nitrate and butyrate dopes that work well with tissue paper. And so the way that you would use this material is that you would take a paintbrush and you would brush that all over your structure and just give it one good coat, or you can thin it out with acetone and you can give it 2 light coats on all of your structure, fuselage, wings, etc. Then what you would do is take your tissue with it dry, and let's see, we'll use the rudder vertical tail since it's small enough. Cut out a piece that's a little bit oversized. And then you're going to lay that piece down dry, and you're going to take acetone and you're going to brush acetone onto all of the tissue where it passes over the structure. And then you can brush it down, and it will, brush it down with your hand or with a paintbrush. And as the acetone dries, having dissolved partially the dope that's on that structure, that will then seep into the tissue and it'll bond to the tissue. And then you can repeat that same process where you would use more, you could, with your paintbrush, dip out dope all along the edges and lap that over and repeat that same process. And you would do that for the entire aircraft. Now, the important thing is that once you have completed that process, you're going to have all of these flying surfaces, fuselage, etc., that's covered in that tissue paper. The tissue paper, as it is raw and it's sensitive to moisture in the air. So what you'll want to do at that point is to take preferably a non-tautening nitrate dope, and you're going to thin it out down to about 30% with acetone, which you can get at a hardware store, and you're going to use a brush to brush that all over the tissue paper. And you're going to give it 2 coats of that. So you brush it all over the tissue paper, let it dry, come back and give it another coat. And once you're done with that, the tissue is sealed and ready to go. Now, in between that, if you have attached the tissue with dope, you can spray it with water and then pin the flying surfaces down so that they don't warp as the tissue dries, and the tissue will tighten up and you get this very nice tight finish from your tissue paper. On your fuselage, once we come back, I'm covering this airplane with plastic, so it's a different process. We have a video, there will be a link down in the description, but the plastic is not supplied with this airplane. And the reason I'm covering this one with plastic is it's going to eventually be flown off the water, and I want a completely waterproofed seal, covering, etc. on all of my flying surfaces, so that it can handle the rigors of that particular environment. But once you're done, you'll come back and tissue paper over everything, and then you can cut out these window areas, and then we'll show you how to attach the plastic windows to them and so on. So once we come back, the airplane will be completely covered and finished. It will be completely covered. We'll then show the process of finishing the airplane. Okay, so we have the airplane covered now, and like I said, we covered this one with plastic. Yours will more than likely be covered with tissue. So what we're going to do is we will start by attaching the vertical tail to the horizontal stab. Now, particularly with plastic, but this is also true with tissue, bonding on top of that covering is a little problematic, and so your fin will tend to break off unless you poke through the covering a little bit with a straight pin. So what I'm doing is I am just taking this straight pin and going all along the rib, and you only want to go on the rib because off to the side you're just poking holes in your covering for no benefit. But if you poke through those areas, you're going to provide a route for the glue to soak through, and then you'll have a nice strong bonding surface for the glue to go through. So now at this point, I can take my vertical stab, or my fin, whatever you want to call it, and my CA glue is clogged. And now what we want to to do is align our vertical tail with that rib. We want to get this on as straight as possible, because that will make lining everything up much easier when the time comes that we're trying to key this surface for proper alignment. Because one of the problems is, since this fin is attached to your stab, which is a moving surface, you're going to rubber band it down. It's going to move at one point in flight for the dethermalizer action. That means this isn't fixed down, so you need something to be able to lock it down to properly align this rudder. It's easy to get proper alignment this way because you'll be supported front and back. The trick is to also get that alignment in this direction, which is critical for your trimming. So we'll discuss that a little bit later, and we'll show how to key the horizontal stab for that proper alignment. For proper DT action, you're going to want to cut out the covering from this slot in both the sub fin and up here on your vertical. I have already cut out a bit on this sub fin, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our dowel, and it's shown somewhere on your plans. I've got it covered up right now, the recommended length, but the bottom line is just have it stick out about like that, which is enough to get things, to get a good purchase on that area. And so you can break it off, break the dowel off, and glue it in. You can see I've got about that much sticking out. And now, at that point, we can go ahead and we can repeat that same procedure for the that we did for the vertical stab. We now do the same thing on the sub fin to glue it in place. It's very important that you do your best to align this fore and aft. So let's see if we can, there you go. You want to line this up so it's straight line all the way up here to the front. And there we go. For our next step, let's go ahead and clear off the excess covering over our side windows. Once you have cleared off your side area of your windows and this windshield area as well, you can come in with a piece of your clear plastic that's supplied with the kit. And you can either use the side view on the plans or on the plane. You can lay this in place and just mark out where to cut it. And the ink from the pen will not really, depending on what kind of pen you use, will not tend to stay there, so it's not too big of an issue. You can wipe it off once you're done. Or if you draw the lines just a little bit large, you can just cut inside the line. Now the proper adhesive to use is like RC65, I think that's what it is, canopy glue. There are some other rubber-based cements that work. I'm going to use CA glue. I recommend that you don't do what I am doing though, because CA glue will leave white residue in it, not where you glue it, but in the vicinity of that. And so it doesn't look great later. I, however, am on a time crunch to get this airplane done, so I'm going to show it being glued down with CA glue. And like I said, unless you are on a time crunch, I recommend not doing that because it ends up looking ugly. Now we're going to ensure that it looks ugly by speeding the process along even faster, which crazes the glue even worse. But that's because I want to show you something. To attach the dowel that goes through this area for our wing hold down, you're going to want to take your razor blade and cut out very carefully a little hole. There we go. And then your dowel will fit through that hole once you've got everything else, all the rest of the windows installed. So there you go. We have the fuselage done as far as windshields installed, side windows, and I've also cut the dowels to size and installed them at the 4 locations. So you have your wing mount pegs here. This one is for the rubber band to hold your nose block in place, and then this one you're going to wrap around your landing gear. So the next thing is that we need to return back here to the tail, and we're going to install the tail mount platform. So that is from that wing spar sheet that you had. It's this piece right here. And so we're going to take it out, and we're going to install it with this notch facing forward. And you want to get this as well centered in there as you possibly can. Also, I would suggest taking out any excess covering material that's in this area. And try not to break off your sub-fin, as I think I may have just done. So now we can squirt glue down in here. And again, center this up in here as best you can. Just like that. And like I said, I popped my sub-fin loose, so the next thing is that you're going to want to put some little 1/8 inch notches right here. So there are a couple of different approaches to doing this, but basically I'm taking a piece of 1/8 square scrap wood. I'm going to cut off 2 little pieces of it. So little pieces about yay long. And what we're going to do is we're going to glue these right here next to this notch. And you want to get them up right against the notch, because these are going to serve both as forward travel limits as well as alignment keys for your vertical tail. just like that. Next step that we need to follow is we're going to attach this horizontal tail assembly to the aircraft. So we've got everything keyed up front. We're going to latch this in by taking a rubber band, and we are going to run it all the way over the top here. And then we are going to sight down, let's see here, the fuselage to make sure our vertical tail is correctly aligned. So I'm sighting down actually from the back of it, which is really the preferred thing. But you want to make sure, most importantly, that that runs straight, parallel all the way down. Once you've done that, take a pen and very gently we're going to mark right up against the fuselage on either side without disturbing anything. And then we're going to pop this rubber band loose. And especially if you are plastic covered, you're going to want to actually clear away the plastic right on that line and slightly to the outside of it on each side. Oops. Don't do what I did and punch a hole in your covering. I will patch that hole later. I'm not messing with it right now. Now let's take some of our 1/8 inch scrap. We're going to cut off 2 short little lengths of it. We want the inside of each of these lined up with the lines that we drew. It is very important that you ensure that the glue is completely hardened before you proceed, because the next step is that we're going to mount this stabilizer back in place. So I'm going to take this rubber band and we're going to make it a little tighter. Oops, if I can be careful. There we go. And so now it tends to tip the tail up like this. That's a little bit steep, so we want a limit line back here. And the way that we're going to install a limit line is I'm going to take some of my Kevlar thread. And you specifically want this yellow Kevlar to keep it from getting burned. So I'm going to tie a knot down here, and I'm going to secure that knot with CA glue. You need something fairly sharp to cut this cleanly. There we go. Now, set this horizontal tail at about a 45-degree pitch-up angle with this line looped over like so. Now what you're going to do, holding that in place, we're going to tie this off into a loop. We're going to follow the same process here. need a sharper razor blade. This one is done. And then what I can do is I can loosen this rubber band slightly, remove it temporarily, slide this over that peg. Now if I don't lose the rubber band, I can put it back over. And now that line is retained. So now when my stab pops up, it's stuck right there. The next task is take some of your 1/4 inch aluminum tubing. You may have a shorter length than this, but you're going to use a pair of pliers to flare the end of this tubing. Cut it off about 3/8 of an inch long. And you may have some resistance getting into this hole back here. I already cleared mine, but you may have to like sharpen the end of the tubing or something to cut in there a little bit. But the bottom line is the flared end sticks out. So we squirt some glue in. And that's as far in as mine's going. I think I got some CA accelerator on it. However, that's still fine, even with it sticking out a little bit. You can then take some dethermalizer fuse and get that Kevlar thread clear of it. And then we will take another rubber band It's important that the rubber band wrap around the fuse. So when you light this, it'll burn through the rubber band and release this. The line is fairly, that Kevlar is fairly heat resistant, so it'll hold pretty well. Go ahead and cut the slot here in your covering where your landing gear goes. And should it ever loosen up, you can simply use a rubber band to secure it so it doesn't fall out. Your wing can be keyed with those little 1/8 inch strips the same way that you did the tail. But the main thing is secure your wing with a couple of rubber bands, just like that. And make sure you line it up well. Next, take your nose bearing and your nose block, and what you're going to do is clear out this hole, and then you're going to glue this nose bearing in. Now, the way I recommend that you do this, and notice I'm not gluing mine in because I'm going to put a different propeller assembly on it, but you can stick this propeller shaft in, and if you remember, the slot is at the bottom, so if we look from the top, it'd be real nice if you glue this in while you're pulling the shaft over a little bit to bend it to the right just a little bit. Now, the next thing to do is once you have this bearing glued in, and it is very important that it be glued in securely, then you can slide your propeller shaft, your propeller, onto this propeller shaft, having inserted the prop shaft from behind. And you can grab the shaft right here. Make sure you leave enough clearance that you can get the motor loaded easily on and off of the prop shaft back here. And then pull forward for this process so that you can very firmly bend over the prop shaft. You only have to bend it over about 80 degrees, and that allows it to engage just at the top of this freewheel ramp so that it disengages and turns freely in flight. Then at that point, assuming that you've done everything else up to this point, you can take this rubber band load it around, and it fits onto that slot on the bottom and holds your nose on. The last part I will show you is to take this piece of aluminum tubing, and we're going to cut it to size based on that, based on the width of the fuselage. And this will form your rear peg. I recommend for most of you, you're going to be flying 4 strands of 1/8 if you've built the airplane decently lightly. So you can poke it through the covering right in there, and now you have a rear motor anchor. So nose block remains removable so that you can stretch the rubber motor out, also for access to winding. Congratulations! This concludes the build presentation for the Echo from J&H Aerospace. We will show a link in the description for how to set up rubber motors for this airplane. For competition, you are limited to 10 grams of rubber for P-30 flying. You can fly on an unlimited amount for Moffett flying. However, this is primarily intended as a P-30, but it is an excellent beginner's Moffett. There's a link in the instructions below, in the description below, like I said, that shows how to braid motors, and you will need to braid a motor to properly tension the motor for this model. And like I said, it shows how to sleeve the rear peg should you desire, but mainly just how to get the motor loaded up and ready to go. There are various trimming videos that we've done. I will link one down below that gives some of the basics, but the bottom line is balance this airplane at the recommended CG on the plans, and then adjust your elevator trim, shimming either the trailing edge or leading edge based on whether it stalls or dives, to get a proper glide going. After that, add a tab up here if you need to correct for any trim, any turning in the glide, remembering to check for warps in your wings. If you see anything out of alignment before you fly it, you should check for those warps. After that, you can use thrust line adjustments to trim your power pattern, and you're off to the races. I hope to see you at contests flying this airplane, and we'll see y'all later. Hi, I'm Josh Finn. This is Hope. We are J&H Aerospace.
If you like this video, hit the like button.
Also, how about subscribe to our channel and check out jhaerospace.com for new free flight products and all of the tooling that you'll need to build them.
Thanks for watching.